Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Estate World Podcast. All right, so we're back. We're back. So this is Scott Picard with the Real Estate World Podcast. I am joined by a very special guest who is joining us from afar today. Our guest name is Rob Mehta. Rob is someone who I worked with. Gosh, Rob, how long has it been? 10 years, 15 years? Since you're,
I'll just say it's been a few years. How about that?
It's been a few years. So, Rob has been gracious enough to give us some of his time today. We're going to talk about how the coronavirus is impacting him, what he's currently up to in the real estate business, and then also some strategies he and I have going forward to, keep you in the correct frame of mind despite all of the chaos that's going around with us, that and much more. So Rob, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to join you for this episode.
Yeah, no, totally appreciate it. So just, we might as well reveal, where are you joining us from today?
I should almost give a 60-second pause and see if anybody on Facebook actually answers this, guesses correctly. But I'm actually joining you today from Bangkok, Thailand. So okay. It is morning for you and it's evening for me. I'm joining you on a Friday evening here.
What time is it there?
I am exactly 12 hours in the
Okay.
future from Minnesota. So it's 10:13 in the evening right now.
I'm going to say at time of recording today is April 3rd. 2020. It's 10:13 a.m. And I like to timestamp these episodes now because traditionally when you're creating a lot of content, a lot of people like to create like evergreen content, right? Content that you can pull off the shelf and kind of plug in anywhere, and whether it's today or 5 years from now, people don't really know the difference. But I'm telling you, this is a very unique time in history, and I would like to believe that a year from now, we're going to look back on this and we're going to want to know what was going on when it was happening. And hopefully we look back, hopefully we're still here, right? But hopefully we look back and we can, say, wow, that was a crazy time we were in. Glad we got through that. And we're better from the experience, or we gain something out of it. So, what is the impact? Like, you're in Bangkok. I've been to Bangkok. It's been probably a decade, 10 years or so since I've been there. One of the more vibrant cities I've ever visited. I tell you, coming into Bangkok downtown, which is a pretty big area, right? But in the taxi, I'll never forget that experience. It was absolutely mind blowing. What is the general disposition of the populace, the locals there? Is everyone sheltering in place? I assume it's not business as usual right now, correct?
Yes, you are correct. So yeah, to kind of piggyback off of what you said about first, the first arrival into Bangkok. I remember my first arrival too. It was back in 2006, and I actually came here at the time. There was a group of us actually from the Twin Cities that had traveled here to take our CIPS designation course here, which for those of you that don't know what that is, it's the National Association of Realtors offers a designation. It's called the Certified International Property Specialist. And a group of us came over to go through that course here and spend some time in Bangkok. And that's what started my introduction to this amazing city. And absolutely, if you're not a fan of big cities and a little bit of, as I would describe it, sensory overload, then Bangkok is probably not the place for you. However, right now, Bangkok is about as different as you can imagine than business as usual. It's very, relatively speaking, very quiet here. You can actually get in a car and actually do some driving around the city and not be stuck in gridlock traffic, which is what's very, very common here to see. And people are, the term hunkering down. I keep hearing that from the States. People are hunkering down. There is not a stay in place order here yet. However, today, actually this evening, is the first time that we've got a curfew. We've got actually a government mandated curfew from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And that's going to last as long as the government deems it necessary. However, about 3 weeks ago, is when the government decided to shut down all non-essential businesses, which is of course what's happening in the States as well. So really about the only thing we have access to here if you leave, your condo or your home is, of course, grocery stores, pharmacies, doctor's offices, medical offices, things like that. And
are
then, of
liquor
course,
stores
restaurants and
open?
such.
Are liquor stores essential services?
Yes and no. Most of them are. Now, most liquor stores here are not standalone like they are in the States. They're actually located inside of grocery stores. And actually, you
Right.
can walk into a 7-Eleven here and buy liquor and all of that kind of stuff too. And so, of course, those types of places are still, of course, offering. However, I keep seeing people post things on Twitter here and there that show stores that are closing up, or grocery stores that are actually roping off their sort of their hard liquor, areas and things like that. So there is some of that happening. I haven't personally ran into that yet myself, but everybody else is kind of in shutdown mode. Of course, delivery and all of that is still available, which is great. This is a wonderful city. If in a matter of convenience, you can get anything here pretty much delivered right to your front door. So that makes things a whole lot easier. But it does make it hard to really get out and really do anything outside of maybe going out for a short walk or a short drive to just get some fresh air.
So are like bars and restaurants and stuff, though, they're basically closed down too, and just with takeout, or are those kind of walk-up windows still available, or how is that working?
A little of both. Yeah, most of the restaurants here. So there's about 4 or 5 different delivery services here in Bangkok. You have a company called Food Panda, which is one of the larger ones. There's a company called Grab, which Grab was a competitor to Uber here a few years ago. And then Uber decided to actually exit the market, and they bought a stake in Grab. So Grab is the equivalent to Uber here, which just like in the States, you can have food delivered through Grab services and all of that. So you have some of that. You do have many restaurants that are offering, they call it here takeaway service. So basically just, walk up, order, and of course, observe social distancing and all of that. And take your food to go. What's interesting is one of the coolest apps here is called Eatigo. And Eatigo was basically a discount app. I guess you could call it similar to like an Open Table, where basically you book your reservation on whatever restaurant you're looking to go to. But Eatigo had discounts built in depending on what time your reservation was for. And so now that particular app is shifted to not a delivery app, but a takeaway app. So you can still take advantage of these restaurant discounts. And sometimes they're quite good, 30-40% off of what the restaurant's menu prices are. But of course, now it's a pickup service only.
Okay. So what is I remember when the last time I was in Bangkok, there was an election going on, and we went to a bar, but basically the night before they had to close like all the bars down by like 8:00. And I remember it was our last night of a Southeast Asian trip. I think we were there for like 4 weeks, and the bar owner shut the doors, locked the doors, pulled the blinds, and let everyone stay there till like 11:00 until the military police came in and finally said, "Hey, it's time to go." And I look back on, I'm like, that was kind of foolish on our part. We could have been, we could have, I guess, theoretically been arrested and stuck in a Thai gulag for all eternity, So interesting. So you tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I know you've helped recently helped my in-laws, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, through your referral network in Florida.
Yes, correct.
And they bought a condo in St. Petersburg, which ironically enough, we were supposed to be at this past weekend, which didn't happen. They closed. We were supposed to go to Disney World, Kennedy Space Center, and then St. Petersburg to spend time with the in-laws. It was basically our one family trip we had planned this year, and of course, obviously we didn't go. We don't want to endanger our kids or ourselves unnecessarily. But it made me think about that. Like you help with that process, but you help a lot of people. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So our primary business is the Florida market. As Scott, as you know, of course, we worked together in Minnesota for many years, up until the point where I made the move to Florida. Actually, it's coming up on 4 years this year. I can't believe it's already been 4 years. But when I made the move down, the goal is to focus our energies and our attention on working with out-of-state clients that want to make a purchase in the Florida market. So we really have really 3 sort of distinct categories of clients that we work with. We have folks like your parents, of course, that are looking for sort of the snowbird getaway, let me come down and use my condo, use it with the family, that sort of thing. We have pure investors, of course, that are looking to either buy into seasonal investments like Airbnb, or they're looking at more long-term plays, things of that nature. And then, of course, we have the folks that relocate. And of course, as you know this, Florida is the fastest growing state when it comes to the populace, and it has been for some time. But what's really interesting today is that you're seeing more and more younger families move into the state. There's a lot more job prospects outside of just the hospitality and, of course, the tourism business, which has, of course, been the big driver in the Florida market. But you've got areas like Orlando and Tampa and many other areas that are developing sectors such as biotech and different types of industries away from the tourism. And of course, so that's attracting younger families, it's attracting working families. And so we're really seeing a very, very diverse, clientele base. It's not the old adage of, you buy in Florida, you move to Florida to die. I mean, it's really changing. And so that's been really, really fascinating. But I would say about 90% of our business comes from the Midwest market. And of course, a lot of personal relationships that we have, companies such as yourself, where, we've got a good relationship in place, and that we're a good trusted advisor, to your client. We don't do a lot of B2C, business to consumer marketing, even in Florida, because we keep very busy actually with the broker to broker relationships that we have, and those customers, those clients that are sent to us. And so, and of course, it's always enjoyable, right? When you do have a broker call you up and say, hey, I've got somebody that's heading your way, can you help them out? And so we always appreciate that. And so over the last 4 years, what I've done is to build out a network of very, very good agents, pretty much in every metro market in the state. There's a couple of pockets that we still don't cover quite yet. I don't have anybody in the couple of different markets that are in the Florida Keys yet. And there's a couple of holes in the middle of the state where we just don't have coverage. But really starting from the Panhandle all the way down the Gulf Coast, and then going back up the Atlantic side, we've got an agent in literally, if not one, multiple agents in every metro, and also in Orlando as well. And so typically what our process is, again, I get a call, an email, a text message, Facebook, whatever, from one of our broker partners. And I usually have the initial conversation with that client, figure out what they're looking to do. And then, then we'll place them, of course, with our boots on the ground agent, if you will. What's unique about our process is that I stay involved from start to finish with that client. So it's not a handoff, if you will. And so our boots on the ground client, of course, does the showings and handles, those activities. But I personally stay involved in every transaction, basically from start to finish. And I enjoy that piece of it. I really do. And I've met some of the most interesting people working, obviously in the Florida market. Because we have folks, of course, many that are coming from the Midwest, as I said, but, we have international buyers. That's part of what I'm doing here, is cultivating the international market. And, it's just a really, really fascinating place to do business.
Kind of I guess I want to piggyback on that. So with that market down there, what was the draw? Like, you've been down there for a while, I believe, right? Like, when did you enter that market, and what inspired you? I mean, other than just getting out of Minnesota, I can imagine. And I love Minnesota, don't get me wrong. We are flyover country. I am in the bunker, and I'm not trying to troll Minnesota, but obviously there's the obvious reasons to go to Florida. But what specifically drew you down there?
Well, for me, I was born and raised in Minnesota, born in St. Paul, grew up in South Minneapolis, and Minnesota was always home, of course. And in some form or fashion, it always will be. My mother still lives in Minnesota. We have lots of friends and, other family as well. Really the attraction is that Florida for me became a second home, probably about 25 years ago. My father actually relocated and got sick of the Minnesota winters, decided he wanted out. And mother and father were no longer together, so he made the move. And of course, after that point, I probably spent anywhere between 2 and 3 vacations, a year, school vacations and all that kind of stuff, going down to Florida. And so over time, it of course just became a second home. We started investing and looking at property, about 4 years ago, and did not have a real set plan at that time necessarily to make a permanent move, but more of, let's make an investment play. And of course, one thing led to another, and very quickly came to the realization, well, why don't we make this a permanent move? Could we not theoretically, get into the market and get established, and of course start doing business. And while we still try to keep some of our Minnesota contacts and some of our Minnesota business going as well. These days, Minnesota business is a very, very small percentage of what I do. I still handle business that comes to us from past clients and referrals and that sort of thing, and some business partnerships that we have. But it's a very, very small percentage of what I handle, because again, our focus is on the Florida market.
So what do you see going on in Florida right now? I mean, we all have the internet, I think, and we can all watch TV, which I'm trying to cut down a little bit of both right now, because I don't know that watching these, counters that I keep being mesmerized by, kind of like, who was that snake in the Jungle Book? No, trust in me. Like I'm just hypnotized by it. But what is going on? I mean, nationwide, I believe, real estate is being impacted, but what about specifically to Florida? What are you seeing, or what are you hearing, I guess?
Well, what's interesting, so I'm sure everybody that's watching the news is seeing this, is that it looks like Florida is going to have a rather large impact. We just went to a stay-at-home order just 2 days ago. Our governor, Ron DeSantis, held off for some time, and I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong. I can imagine that he is in a very tough position, because he's trying to balance the economy of Florida with, of course, the safety of the citizens. And so that, it's a very tough spot to be in, of course. And of course, this virus, the way it's been moving and such.
That's kind of my mindset too. Like you guys, everyone's off limits right now in terms of the decision. I think everyone's doing the best they can. Like,
the best they can.
Yes. A year from now, we can look back and say what we could have done better. But I've taken the position, like, everyone do the best they can with the information they have in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have not experienced anything like this, ever.
We have
not anybody who's alive right now. They point back to the what was the Spanish flu outbreak, I think, in 1918.
Yes.
Was this the nearest equivalent? But how many people were alive then that remember? So
right.
Anyway,
right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your
no, not
presentation.
at all. Well, what's interesting, just as an aside to that too, is that you think back in the last 10, 15 years, we've had SARS, we've had, the different Asian flus and things like that have happened, but none of them have spread the way this has, by any means. And so, again, I'm not defending anybody or any of our politicians for this. I mean, I think there's blame to be spread equally around both parties and everything. But, again, I mean, when we heard about this in January, and it's starting to spiral, who knew, right? The way it would sort of jump across oceans, and the way that, just the speed that it spread at is pretty incredible. Because again, I can remember hearing about SARS a few years ago, and the bird flu, which I think was part of SARS, and, a few other things.
Yeah, there was swine flu, bird flu, the SARS. I don't remember. Like,
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Or maybe connected to it. So who knew, right? I mean, a lot of this, and, just it's sort of, we're dealing with it on a day-by-day basis. So, so Florida, I think we're very early. I mean, we still have, obviously, businesses being transacted, and transactions are happening. I think we are starting to see some impact now, starting to see it sort of take place. And probably the worst, I think, is still ahead of us here over the next few months as this virus continues to spread. Now we have a lockdown order in the state. So I think that will help you keep hearing this term, flatten the curve. If we can get everybody to isolate, then that should stop the spread of it at least. And then it's just a matter of getting, the folks that have gotten infected, right, getting them back to healthy status. But, we are very much at the sort of the beginning of this, at least for the state is. And, we just had 2 cruise ships dock yesterday in Fort Lauderdale that have patients on board, that have, folks that have been infected. So, it's going to be pretty widespread, I think. And we're going to see some impact happen, of course, to the real estate. It's hard to say to what extent, of course, but, we very much are still at the very early stages of this as far as the state is concerned. I think a lot of the other states around the country are a little bit further along with these processes, and maybe even getting over the hump, if you will, compared to maybe where we are at today.
Yeah, talk about the horror of being on one of those cruise ships where you are told that you cannot dock anywhere. People, hundreds of people sick, people literally dying on the ships. I can't imagine, and then being restricted to, your cabin, which most of these are, they're size, the cabins are the size of a walk-in closet in some homes, right? Like they're,
Right. Right.
so yeah, thank God for
Yeah.
those people. They finally can get off the ship. I think that they're going to let them off. And, even if you've got to go into quarantine, I think it would still be better than being stuck on the ship. What do you know
Yes.
about like what's
Yes.
going with, Airbnb? Have you followed that at all? Like, I don't know if you were involved in any of that business, but I mean, Airbnb has effectively gone to zero in terms of reservations, kind of like, or, do you, and again, if we're outside of your wheelhouse, tell me to shut up. But like, I know a bunch of people locally here who operate Airbnb, and they're just like, yeah, our bookings have dried up completely. In fact, a lot of
Yes.
them, they did their, they did their financials based on a certain revenue projection. Now a lot of them are looking at just trying to rent them, add in long-term renters and hopefully staunch the bleeding there a little bit. So like there's all
Right.
these different areas, these different, I guess, micro markets or sub markets in real estate too, that you don't really, no one could have really predicted what was going to happen here, and just see like, reservations in the hotel industry go from, 80%, 90% bookings to like zero overnight. And
Yes.
what impact is that going to have on the commercial real estate market, right? Like I get a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of people asking me, well, do you think this is going to be like 2008 and 2009? To which I say, no, I don't think it's going to be anything like that. The 2008, 2009 was a industry caused recession. Like poor lending practices, too easy access to credit, people just losing their minds a little bit with their prices they were paying. There was some outright fraud. We don't have that now. Like we don't have the, I don't see the fraud that we had, in 2006, 7, 8, whatever, leading up to that financial crisis. I don't see that the lending standards had not just been relaxed, they were almost, it was almost malfeasance on the fact that some of these lenders, but they're in order to hit their monthly numbers, they just kept making riskier and riskier and riskier loans. And we don't see that right now. In fact, if you look at, as of last Friday, FHA, DVA, FHA is, kind of considered to be a first-time home buyers program. It's not limited to, but it's the HUD insured low down payment loans, Department of Veterans Administration, zero down. It's a veterans benefit. And then U.S. Department of Agriculture loans. They raise most of the lenders who are doing those loans basically said, unless you're 660 credit, we're not going to do any more new loans there. There's a lot of fear,
Yes.
that, there's a high risk of default there. So this is very different than what we saw in 2008. I think there's people who think we're going to have, we could have in foreclosures en masse here. We could have a situation where people who have lost their jobs, who were otherwise very well qualified to make their payments, could end up going in foreclosure. But I think that HUD is stepping in and trying to stop that already, though, right? By giving forbearances and stuff. So I don't know how much you follow any of that, but unfortunately, my email box is stacked up with different news reports, and I'm a news junkie, when it comes to real estate, because I want to know, and you want to know how can we help people, right? In this situation. Right. Like,
yeah, I would agree. I don't think we're going to see what we saw in 08. The situation there was just, night and day compared to what we're dealing with today. We don't have that type of lending today. I don't want to say that we don't. We do in some regards. There are no income, no doc, loans out there, but you can't obtain them these days unless you have 20, 30%, cash into the property. So, it's a different scenario. I've had the same question come up with folks, of course, customers that we have, saying, is this the right time to buy and all of that. And of course, I always tell them, if I had that crystal ball, believe me, I'd be in a different economic situation than even what I'm in right now. But, that being said, if you look at, the overall picture, the market, yes, it's heated in some areas of the country. In most parts of Florida, it's not, it's not overheated, just based on the metrics that we follow. And of course, the fact that you do have folks that are coming in with, in some cases, substantial cash. So they've got equity into that property as well. You mentioned about the Airbnb. Of course, Florida is one of the largest Airbnb markets in the country. Their Airbnb actually has, I think it's like 23 or 24 distinct markets inside of Florida that they track. And so that definitely is having a big impact. Of course, those bookings have dropped to zero. Airbnb, I think rightly took the stance that they were going to refund bookings and fees and that kind of thing. Which only makes sense. I mean, as you said, your family was coming down, and can you imagine if all of a sudden, on top of not being able to come, you've taken now this huge financial hit because you can't get a refund on your Airbnb or your airline tickets or Disney or whatever it is. It's kind of a, more than a double blow then at that point, So yeah, of course, the Airbnb, market has collapsed, just based on what's going on with travel and everything of that sort. Yeah, we are seeing folks that are maybe considering it, if this were to continue long-term, more than a few months here, that they look at shifting. And we've had those conversations with some folks too about shifting into more of an annual rental scenario. On a yield basis, they're probably not going to do as well as if they would in a good year as an Airbnb, but of course it does stabilize the income. Now you've got a renter in there for 12 months. You've bought yourself a little bit of cushion. Hopefully, at least your expenses hopefully are covered. That kind of thing. So that's definitely a strategy that I think a lot of folks are looking at right now, is how do we stem, and control that bleeding from, the overhead costs that are going to continue, with the mortgages and the taxes and, even with some of the things happening on that end, those costs are of course still going to be there long term. So how can you mitigate some of those things? Well, that's one way to do it, is to shift the strategy for that property, at least for the next maybe 12 months, and see where it takes us, from there.
Yeah. So if someone were to call you up, what do you tell them? They say, what do you do? Are you saying, let's give it a month, or do you say, let's start looking at what you can get as a long-term rental or even, monthly rental? Because I got to believe like some of those, like tourism is a massive part of the Florida economy, right? It's
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
like communities like the Orlando, with all the parks being closed right now, I can't imagine like the number of people who are unemployed in that community alone, and what the outlook is. It's a little alarming to think about it, right? And like what we did is we have a property management business too, and 2 or 3 weeks ago we started when it became apparent, it was probably middle of March, early to mid-March, where there's something really bad's happening, because I think there was the hot zone or outbreak near Kirkland, Washington, the state of Washington, and Seattle, basically they were shutting down, and then New Rochelle, New York, for some reason, I never understood what the reason was, but that community had an outbreak. So we started compiling a list of different agencies where tenants could get assistance, right? And we had like 30 different organizations that they could call for, like, it could be something as simple as SNAP benefits or food stamps. That's what they were called. And when we got them, I grew up on food stamps, full disclosure. If there was, I grew up on a dairy farm, central Minnesota. We were the poorest people. People have heard this sob story before, but and we were, if there was a government program, we were on it. So I just have to go through my memory banks and think about what we were on, because there's right now is not a time for pride for a lot of folks. Like you have to, like, there's the CARES Act, is that the $1,200 coming out. If you've been unemployed, if you've been laid off, apply for unemployment. We saw that 10 million people have applied for unemployment in the last 3 weeks in the United States.
Right.
It's just a staggering number when you look at historically the historical new applications for unemployment benefits. It's like 100 times the previous high. And so anyway, Sue, we created this list, county aid, food assistance, temp agencies if someone wants to get work, and we send that to our rental community, when people say, hey, I'm having trouble, we say, well, here's a list. And if you know, if you are unemployed now, you know, have you done A, B, and C? In fact, I even went so far as I'm not eligible for unemployment, but I went out there and started the application and went all the way through to the, almost to the point of hitting submit, just so I could understand what people are doing when they apply for unemployment,
what they're
so
going
that,
through.
yeah, what
Absolutely.
they're going through. Yeah. Like,
Absolutely.
and I, you know, I called several banks to find out, okay, what is, you know, what are your, you know, what are you doing for, you know, help for people, forbearance options, you know, and went on many different websites, so that if people call and ask us, you know, when they ask me for advice, I can actually give them, you know, a qualified opinion. I can't, you know, I'm not a financial planner per se. I mean, I'm a real estate guy, so I guess in that context I am. I certainly can't give medical advice, but you certainly can, you can kind of guide both tenant, landlord, your real estate clients more effectively if you actually go through the, you know, not just go through the motions, but actually fill out these forms. There's a $10,000, the EIDL loan right now for small business owners. And I don't know if you've run across this at all, but they, you know, the restaurant industry is decimated here.
It is. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like it's absolutely decimated. And many of these restaurants, they're not going to reopen. It's just
They're not.
yeah,
Right.
and it's sad, you know. You know, in these this is the you know, the life's work for a lot of people.
Yes.
But you know, for a lot of small business owners, there is like emergency money available. It's the economic injury disaster loan. You can go out and go to the SBA.gov, click on the link. It's like right there as a banner ad, and you can get your name, put your name in, your business name and stuff, and you can get an emergency loan, which is more than likely forgivable. So it's almost literally a grant for $10,000, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
will that, you know, if we're still here a year from now, will that be enough? No, but you know, if it gets you through the month of April and, you know, part of May, and it's because part of, you know, the other part of this that, you know, people are talking about, it's the stress, right? The stress and that burden that puts on your health, and how it compromises, you know, stress will compromise your immune system and make you more susceptible to getting ill as well. So
absolutely,
you know, so people are battling constantly, not just, there's the real fear, which is this, you know, this invisible, you know, that's we talked before the meeting about, like, this is this invisible enemy that we're fighting, right? And it's that the fact you can't see it. Nobody really knows how long this is going to last. Nobody really knows, like, if they are going to get infected and how bad it's going to affect them. You know, obviously there's a percentage of the population that's definitely higher risk, but you know, as far as you know, you haven't gotten it yet.
As far as I know, I haven't had any symptoms, and I'm trying to stay, you know, indoors and away from, of course, any potential crowds. That's pretty easy to do here at the moment, since everybody is pretty, you know, observant of you know, just, you know, go out as necessary kind of thing, even though we don't have a lockdown. So yeah, as far as I know, I'm still okay. But you know, it's odd how your mind will get you thinking about this. You know, of course you can't help it. It's out there, you know, 24/7 in the news cycle. But you know, you wake up one morning and you have a little bit of a scratchy throat, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, did I catch this thing? You know, and you know, so it's just a scary time to live through this. You know, you mentioned about you know, the advice we're giving our clients, and you know, do they hold off a few months, or do they, you know, try to convert their property today? You know, it's kind of a case by case. I mean, it really depends on obviously what their situation is, and you know, where they're going to be. I mean, if they have the potential of holding off and you know, potentially shifting, you know, converting that Airbnb into an annual rental, if there is an opportunity to hold off for a few months, you know, I don't think right now it really hurts to hold off, just because I think the rental market itself, no one's really moving on the annuals either, you know. And so, you know, we tell them, you know, if you have the ability to take a little bit of a wait and see approach, maybe, you know, you should do that. But I think, you know, I mean, I think the hump for us, and I think for Florida, is still at least a couple of months out now. You know, just with the spikes that are happening today, easily a couple of months, you know. And so I think personally, it's like a 60 to 90 day period here that an investor has to think about. Okay, I've got, complete loss of income over the next 60, 90 days. If I've got this Airbnb property, can I survive through that time period, until hopefully once we clear that hump and the virus starts to subside, hopefully the markets, and of course, as businesses open up, tourism starts coming back online. And I think that's going to happen, of course, very slowly. At that point, 3, 4, maybe even 5 months down the road, there might be some income potential once more. But, that's just something to think about right now. If you've got one of these properties and, zero income, but the bills are still coming, right? Your overhead and your cost of ownership is still there. So, it's a real consideration, and it really is a kind of a case by case, depending on, what that owner situation is, and, financially, can they weather the storm that we're in?
Right. And I think you nailed it right there. It's really case by case, and what, if someone is absolutely on the ropes already, that's one scenario, and that's one action plan, where someone who has, several months, years worth of reserves, that's a different action plan. For a lot of folks, I've told them, contact your lender, and if nothing else, figure out what options are available to you. And I know, like, I'll speak for me personally, like for my investment properties, most of that is with commercial loans with local lenders, where I've got a banking relationship, which that makes it a little easier to make a phone call and get in touch with somebody, versus, say my home is a mortgage with Wells Fargo, right? And nothing against Wells Fargo, but I don't have the, let's just say I don't have my guy there that I can call and say, hey, can you call me, or text and call me back and let me know what's going on, right? Like just, what should I be thinking? What should I be doing? What are the real options? And, I've heard, people have thrown out this option of a forbearance. Well, say someone's unemployed, they could have a 4 to 6 month forbearance, which basically traditionally means that these payments would stack up, so that if you had a 4-month forbearance on month 5, you would be responsible to pay all 5 months, which really is not going to work for most people,
It's not. Yeah, absolutely.
So there needs to be a better plan for that. So, I think
what lenders are going to have to start looking at, I mean, I think a real serious option is going to be, it can have to be considered is potentially taking, let's say, the next 3, 4, 5 months of payment, and instead of the forbearance scenario is to take those and add those maybe to the end of the mortgage, or do something of that sort. I mean, that, for most people, that's definitely way more workable than all of a sudden, as you said, having 4 or 5 months of payments now due all at once, right? Now, where do you come up with that kind of, that kind of money? That's a real tough situation to be in. So, hopefully we'll see some of that here come into play, because I think that is a much more realistic option for, the average, homeowner out there. And for many of us, I mean, we're average homeowners too. So it would be tough to say, oh, great, I've got a 5-month forbearance, but then all of a sudden those payments are due kind of like a balloon, so we'll see. Yeah,
it's interesting, because one of the things that, when we're working with a lot of tenants who have to pay, who have rent payments due, obviously 3 days ago or right now on our property management side. And our first thing our staff, our property managers do is, we show empathy. Obviously we care. But then also just letting them know, look, for a lot of people, a lot of these landlords, they're not these fat cats who are sitting on mountains of, gold, a la Ebenezer Scrooge, right? They, have with someone feeding them dates all day long. These are people who could be right next to you getting laid off right now, who, this one property is the property they had to keep in 2010 because they were so upside down. So they became accidental landlords, and they still have it. It's like their only retirement investment vehicle right now. And now they're in a situation where, a lot of these people are operating on, less than 45 days of available cash flow too. So it's really, it's a complicated and, I guess, scary situation, for lack of a better word. And I think, I think the next 2-3 months are going to be very interesting as, these different geographic areas, have this flattening of the curve. Like you said, you mentioned,
Yes.
obviously with Florida, but in Florida you have an elderly population, right? You have a disproportionate number of people there, snowbirds or people who have permanently moved to Florida. We had Peter Rizzo on from Arizona earlier in the week, and they have a similar situation in the greater Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale, Glendale area there, where he said a lot of the seniors there, however, either didn't come down or have gone back to their home. A lot of the snowbirds, and he said it's the things are very quiet in parts of that metropolitan,
that market. Sure.
Yeah.
And we've had some of that too, of course, because same thing with a lot of the Florida markets. I mean, when you have such a large snowbird population, and typically our high season runs from basically January through the end of April. So we've got those 4 months, and then of course we do see a good exodus, right? You'll see literally car carriers all up and down the freeways, that are taking people's vehicles back home, quote unquote, because they're heading up north for the summer. So of course we've had some of that too, but then again too, there is also such a large overall population as well. That's a year-round population too. So I think in some ways it's possible that had this really started to take off in Florida and Arizona, let's say in January, definitely I think there's a chance that there potentially could have been even more infections. Of course, we don't know what the numbers are going to come out to at this point, but being that it's sort of now taking off right now, if I guess timing being what it is, again, in some form or fashion, it's probably good that it's, even though it's not good, it's good that it's happening, at this time in the markets versus a little bit earlier in the year where potentially the exposure risk could have been even higher,
Right.
So, who knows? Of course, we're playing with numbers where we don't even know exactly what the exact numbers are, but just speculating based on the fact that Florida, Arizona, even parts of Texas, and so many of the southern states do get a decent amount of snowbirds that are down for several months, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever, and then they head back, up north.
Yeah, snowbirds and spring breakers.
Spring breakers, yes.
That is another petri dish of potential calamity there too.
That was really disappointing to see when I saw the video footage of of course the spring breakers on Panama City Beach and Fort Myers Beach and Fort Lauderdale and all the spring break hotspots, Cocoa Beach and whatever. And I mean, you literally had, I remember seeing at least 1 or 2 kids that were interviewed saying, well, we don't care. It's not going to affect us. And I'm thinking, where were your parents? I mean, did your parents not tell you not to do this? Or are you just, are you just being stubborn and deciding, what the heck with it? We're going to do what we want to do. But that was really, really disappointing to see that. I'm thinking, wow, what a careless decision to make, in a time like this, to go on spring break and, and be in close proximity to so many people, obviously, and then now to potentially expose so many people, to this virus.
So when you go back home and then go on national TV and
that was
memorialize yourself for all eternity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that clip will exist on YouTube for the next 100 years at least, right?
Oh, so, it's the internet. It'll go away. Come on.
Yeah. It always goes away.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So you run into it somewhere.
Before I forget, I want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing internationally. Like, I know, obviously you're in Thailand. You said you're looking for international investment. Can you talk a little bit about that? How, what does that
absolutely.
process look like?
Sure. Yeah. So this was a decision that we made in our business actually would have been not just last year, the year before. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, a vast majority of our clientele comes to us from the northern states, primarily from the Midwest. We do get some obviously clients from other places too, Canada and the East Coast and so on and so forth. One of the things that of course is not a secret trend by any means, of course, is the amount of investment coming into the States, and especially markets like Florida, California, New York, et cetera, et cetera. obviously from overseas investors. And when you look at the Florida market, what's really interesting, if you drill down to the numbers, that market, first of all, it is heavily domestically driven, which is actually a really good thing from a perspective of, the economy. I mean, we've got, close to 80% of the investment coming into the state is domestic investment. So yes, it's an international market, but, it's not dominated by the international scene, which really insulates it from, of course, currency fluctuations and different things that happen in the international market that can, that could really, cause some damage to the Florida market if that really was the case. But when you look at the other 20% there and you look at where that market comes from, of course, a lot of it is driven in Florida by the Europeans that tend to buy, folks from the UK, other Northern European states, and even some of the southern countries, and then even some of the Southern European countries as well. You look at places like California and New York, they tend to be driven more by the Asian market, and, of course, Chinese investors, but, also other parts of Asia that have attracted, investment into, into those markets as well. What I think, we're at the forefront of is I think that for Florida especially, it is a sort of an untapped, a new area of exploration for the Asian buyer who, traditionally would go to California, or they might go to Vancouver in Canada, or they might go to New York or something of that sort, and they maybe have not considered Florida. So, part of what we're trying to do is show that Florida is really a value play, whether you're looking for beach, whether you're looking for, bay, waterfront, whatever it is, you compare the prices in Florida and there's still really a fraction of what that similar type of property might cost you in, let's say, a California market or a New York market or somewhere else. And so last year I decided that we would start establishing a sort of a beachhead here. And of course, having traveled back and forth especially to Thailand over a number of years and having a number of contacts here, it felt only natural to use this as a hub to sort of build, if you will, an agent and a broker driven network, on this side of the Pacific. And so that's what a lot of what I've been doing. It's been a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of boots on the ground time. So I've been doing a lot of travel back and forth, of course, from home in Florida to this market, and which again has felt like a second home for many years. So that hasn't, of course, been to me it's been very natural to spend some time here and to open new relationships and that sort of thing. But it's a very similar to play that what we're doing, and of course with our existing brokers in the States, it's building that broker level relationship and then utilizing our brokers to help us push some marketing out to their databases and of course out through their existing channels as well. And so that's how we're trying to grow the base here, and of course be a resource for an investor here that wants to move money into the States. And again, whether they're looking at pure investment, whether they're looking at a second home opportunity, or something maybe a hybrid of the two, that we've got the resources that we can help them make that investment, but also really be sort of that end-to-end resource, if you will. So of course the purchase, we can help them with things such as, of course, if they are looking to get into a rehab type situation, that's something that we can assist with as well. The ownership piece of it, of course, how long they're going to hold that property for. One thing that we don't get involved in is unlike your company, we don't get involved in the property management side, but we do have some great companies that we work with, both as short-term and vacation management, as well as long-term, annual leases and that kind of thing. So of course, depending on what that investor's end game is, we can recommend a strategy based on that, and based on the property as well. And of course, then at the end of that cycle, of course, the if you will, the disposal of the property, right? Moving on, selling that asset and moving on into something else. So what we're really trying to be is sort of that end-to-end solution, not just the broker that helps them purchase, but the broker that's with them through the life cycle of that, of that ownership. And we're starting to see some success in this market. Of course, we were starting to do some things here and some co-marketing with our brokers through last year in the fall, and then going in the winter. And of course, now things have slowed down a bit with everything that's happening here with the coronavirus as well. But I'm confident that this strategy over the long term will pay off, for us, and of course, hopefully open the market to a greater number of investors that maybe would not consider Florida as an investment market as well.
Wow. No, that's impressive. So are people, when they, like, what kind of properties? There's a lot of condos that people are investing in, or is it single families, multi? I mean, I don't know the Florida market very well. So, full disclosure, like, where are the opportunities that you're pitching to people? Or
Yeah,
it
yeah,
depends.
it's a great question. It really does. So the approach that we take with any client is initially at least figuring out, again, what their goal is with that property. Is it a pure investment play? Is it something that they see themselves using from time to time? Is it a snowbird type situation? What is it? And then of course, based on that, and depending on what market they want to go into of the state, because we do have so many markets, we can start recommending some options to them. We do have some fantastic, I call them sort of hands-off investments, condo hotel type properties and things of that nature, where literally you're buying a completely furnished unit, right down to the silverware and the linens. And, you're putting that unit, or sometimes the units are already running in a hotel type situation. So you're stepping into an opportunity that already has, some cash flow going on there. So we've got things like that, and then of course we of course have a wide variety of other sort of more traditional options too. Buying a single family home, buying in a master plan community of sorts, a golf community, boating communities, all sorts of different things you can do there. So we really start off with sort of having that initial discussion. What is the end goal for this investor? And do they see themselves using the property, or is it a straight investment play? And then of course from there, then we can start fine tuning things a little bit from there, and figuring out what might be a good option for them at that point. So so it really does depend. And I mean, we have such a wide variety of properties, and we work across a wide variety of price ranges, as I know you do as well, in Minnesota. We've sold everything from $90,000 one bedroom condo upwards to multi-million-dollar properties, and again, just depending on what that investor is looking for, what their budget is, that sort of thing. What was interesting, the property that I mentioned, the $90,000 condo that we sold, this was about 1.5 years ago. It was a property that was actually owned by an agent that lived out of state. And we listed the property for her, and it sold quite quick because the price was obviously very good. But that property had an annual rental of about $8,000 roughly a year, based on basically a snowbird that kept coming down every year, and renting that property over and over again. So the new owners, it was a perfect fit for them. They were looking to use the property a few times throughout the year, and they stepped into a really nice revenue situation with this property, with a renter that could come back year after year after year for who knows how long. And so it really was a nice situation to sort of walk into, if you will. For that buyer. So, and those properties, that is not an exclusive in and of itself. There's many of those options out there. We have the ability actually to track Airbnb revenue and things. We have some proprietary third-party tools that we've invested in. So we can actually, we can dig up those properties, if you will. And if an investor is looking for something of that sort, we can help them find something that's already, being managed in a program, generating income, so on and so forth. And it really is the best of both worlds. You're stepping into something that you can utilize yourself, and when you're not there, that it's earning a nice revenue for you. Of course, once we get over the hump with all of this, and that returns. But generally speaking, that's how it's worked out for many of our investors.
Yeah, that's the thing right now. Like, throw out whatever happens in the next 2 months, right? Because this is like bizarre.
Yes.
It's going to be bizarro world. It's going to be absolute pandemonium. But prior to the coronavirus, the pandemic, really striking the U.S., what were there specific areas that were hotter than others, or was it just, what do you prefer? What are you looking for? Like let me step back. The Florida market, had it like kind of leveled off a little bit? Because like in the Twin Cities, we still, and again, who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 months, but we were gradually still heading on an upward trajectory for anything under, let's say, 400, 500, 600,000 and below.
Sure.
Once you got north of 700,000, 800,000, things cooled off significantly, and again, it's all relative, right? If something had a market value of 1.2 million and you put on for 600,000, yes, it's going to sell with multiple offers.
It's going to sell. Yeah.
Right. So what were you seeing down in Florida? Did certain areas have more appeal than others, or was it just kind of, hey, it depends on what you like?
A lot of it does depend. But I mean, if you look at the markets that have been growing the fastest, if you will, in the state, and if you look at, so we, of course, we look at a number of different, reports that are published every year. Many of them overlap, of course, in terms of the hotter cities, if you will. But if you look at the most, let's say just to pick out one example, the most recent Forbes list, which had about 6 or 7 metros in Florida on it. If you look through that list ranked these metros, and number one on that list was actually Fort Myers and Cape Coral, because that has been a massive, massive growth area for a number of years, and primarily driven by folks that are moving in full time. So yes, it does have a bit of a seasonal market, but really it's more that full-time buyer. Some other markets that are doing quite well: Sarasota, of course, some of the bigger cities, Tampa, Orlando. Jacksonville's a big city, and it's still continuing to grow. Again, that's driven more by, I would say, more of your folks that are moving down permanently, more so than more of a seasonal market. And then, of course, you do have some of the seasonal areas as well. St. Pete, Naples, a number of markets, Panama City Beach, that are of course more seasonal in nature as well. So yeah, a lot of it really does depend. And again, depending on what that investor is looking for, do they see themselves utilizing the property or not? I had an investor that was comparing, for example, Tampa versus Orlando. And, one thing I said to him is realize that Tampa is probably going to be, a little bit more of a seasonal market than Orlando, just because, Orlando year round stays pretty busy. And so I just, keep that in mind that, not good or bad either way, but, depending on what your usage pattern is, because they were considering something that, they could, come down and use with the family and that sort of thing. And of course, where do you want to spend time, right? I mean, that's the other piece of it as well. So, so it's really looking at all these different factors. But yeah, when you start ranking sort of the hotter areas versus, what's going on in other places, of course, the coastal markets are doing, fairly well. I mentioned kind of the ranking of the cities and so on and so forth, which might surprise some folks. Some people think Florida and all they think about is Miami or Orlando, but, there are a lot of communities that are seeing, tremendous growth. Again, it's been a combination of a number of things. Of course, the quality of the investment, the price points, low taxes. Of course, it's a very tax-friendly climate in Florida, whether whether you're an employee and, of course, not paying any state tax, or whether you own a business and you have one of the lowest corporate tax, environments in the country, as well as things like estate taxes and so on and so forth, which are, pretty much non-existent in the state as well. So, there's just so many factors there that are at play. Of course, the quality of living, quality of life, and all those things too. So, again, sometimes it's a little bit of analysis paralysis. And I always tell people, well, think about where you're spending time or where you might want to spend some time. And it doesn't hurt to sometimes come down and, time permitting, spend a few days in a few different locales and get to know some of the areas and then start, basing your decision, based on where you feel comfortable, and of course, depending on the price points they're shopping and so on and so forth too. But we've had people start their search sometimes, in Tampa, and then they find themselves buying in Naples, or vice versa. I had the opposite happen too. I had a couple looking in Naples, and they went up to Tampa the next week, and they said, we really want to be in the Tampa area, so they bought in Tampa. So we have a lot of that too. And again, having the network in place is great, because our agents know that there's always a chance that, a handoff needs to happen. And it's a very seamless, process with our team to do that. We coordinate all those things internally so that the client isn't having to, coordinate their own sort of tours between two different agents and figure that kind of stuff out. We try to utilize their time the best, to the best that we can, and make that, a seamless process to, for them as much as possible.
Right. So the question everybody wants to ask is, what area has the least number of hurricanes?
The least number of hurricanes. It's a great question. Well, it's a tough one.
Is there a area that has more? I mean, I would imagine the further south maybe you go, the more likely. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. So, with hurricanes, I mean, obviously that's a, it's sort of like living in the Midwest and, in Tornado Alley and things, right? I mean,
Right.
this is, I guess you could say the sort of the price we pay to live where we live, or living in California and dealing with wildfires or whatever it is. But that being said, now I survived my first one, which was Irma, which was, like the mother of all hurricanes,
Oh yeah.
a couple of years ago. And I really predicted that, headed inland, headed up to Orlando. I actually didn't leave the state or anything, but I headed inland, stayed in Orlando for a few days. And when I returned back to the coast, I fully expected that the house would be under a few feet of water. And we dodged a little bit of a bullet with that, which was good. But that being said, of course, no area in Florida, because of obviously it's peninsula, that is hurricane proof. But if you head inland, you're definitely more safer than staying on the coast. Hurricanes tend to lose energy as they hit land. And so that's one thing that of course that happened with Irma as well, because it crossed over the Keys. Unfortunately, did a lot of damage in the Keys, but the Keys sort of acted as a speed bump, if you will, a little bit to slow it down, in terms of the winds and that kind of thing. And then it made landfall and it kind of swung around, of course, and it came up our side a little bit more than it did, the East Coast. It came up the Southwest side and it hit Marco Island. And Marco Island sort of acted as sort of another speed bump of sorts, And so, by the time it hit Naples, Fort Myers in our area, it was already down to about a 3, 3 to 3.5. And then of course,
still powerful though, right? Like
still powerful. Yes. Yeah. It's still powerful. But again, it started losing its effectiveness. And of course, the further north it went, the weaker it got, over the days that obviously elapsed over that time. So I don't ever want to downplay it. I mean, it's always a risk, of course, and you prepare for these things. And just like you would with living anywhere in the States where there's a chance that something could happen, you prepare, you plan ahead. I always tell people, it's not worth risking, your life or anything to stay put and ride it out. I'm not a fan of that whole ride it out craze. I'd say get the heck out of there, right? I mean, we, headed inland and stayed in Orlando for 5-6 days and then came back down. And that was fine. I mean, obviously there's a cost incurred and some people don't have that option. I understand that as well. But I mean, if you do have the option, why not get to safer ground, so to speak, and, protect yourself. And that's why we have insurance. I mean, again, not to belittle that, but I mean, insurance is there to take care of the house and take care of, whatever. And, the important thing is to get yourself to safety, first and foremost.
Right.
But,
alive is better. Like no matter
alive
what.
is definitely better. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, I always joke, like we're not looking for more martyrs here. We're looking for people who want to live, who want to fight another day. Let's not, of course, there's always going to be someone who can't leave, right? And
yes, always,
and that's tragic. But most people have the ability.
My biggest worry, honestly, was so I live on a Gulf access canal, and I have my boat in the back at the dock behind the house, 15 feet behind the house, and my biggest fear was that my boat would break loose, and it would literally hurl down the canal, and it would come to the T where the canal splits off, and one direction goes to the Gulf and the other direction goes off to another canal, and that it would literally end up in somebody's living room. I mean, that was my biggest and about 2 days before Irma came through, before I left, I had my mechanic came over. I made a run to West Marine and bought additional dock lines, and I mean, we secured this boat as best we could with double tying everything, double lines on every potential cleat. We used a palm tree in my yard, double tie the stern, as well as, of course, on the pilings and that kind of thing. And I mean, luckily when I came back, and we didn't of course experience the storm surge that we would have, because I fully expected the storm surge would come and carry this boat off the pilings and cause a lot of damage. And that was just my biggest fear. And it wasn't necessarily for the boat. It was just, I would have felt horrible had, the boat ended up in somebody's living room, of course,
Right.
Even with insurance and all of that, it just would have been devastating. But, but again, you prepare, you plan ahead, you prepare, you take, obviously, precautions as best as you can. And of course, it's just, it just comes part and parcel with living in this state, that of course the hurricane season comes every year, and, we prepare, and you do the best you can, and know that that's, fortunately or unfortunately, that's just something that we have to face, just like, the Midwesterners have to face the tornadoes and the Californians have to face the fires and
blizzards in the winter, like
blizzards and
you know,
definitely don't miss those at all.
Yeah, January and February is
yeah.
no picnic here in the upper Midwest. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it is nice to be somewhere where you can wear your flip flops in January, and it's just that's just hard to beat. That's for sure. But yeah, it's just a of course a fact of life of the geographic location of the state. And these storms seems to be, in my opinion, they seem to be getting more intensity, more strength. The building codes in Florida are quite good. I mean, we've got category 4 building codes now that are the homes are designed to withstand Irma force winds, and so these homes are built solid. They really are. My home is built to a category 3 standard because it's a little bit older, but it also came out pretty much unscathed. I mean, a few shingles and that sort of thing, some soffit damage, but overall nothing to complain about. So the homes are built well. That doesn't mean you should stay put, in my opinion, but I mean, the homes are built to a very, very very, very high tolerance, if you will.
Aren't they I mean, they're using the laws of physics a little more too, right? When they say, okay, here's how vortex shedding and things like that, where if the wind comes in, how do you, because that's a lot of it. How don't absorb the force of the storm, try to just redirect it around the property, and I know, like, there's a famous bridge, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, I believe, was the one where they didn't account for that, and they opened the bridge, and I think within 2 weeks it had collapsed because they didn't account for the
winds, right?
Wind shear, and I think they call it vortex shedding. I'm not a physicist, but
I remember seeing a video of that.
The
just flopping around, and then it just got destroyed.
Yeah, the deck just collapsed,
I think a lot of those things are factored in today, and of course, maybe they weren't 30, 40 years ago, but they definitely are today. And of course, the construction being what it is today, and materials and that sort of thing, that all kind of comes into into play to make these houses a lot stronger, what they are today versus something that was built. And that's something, again, as we talk to clients about, that's something to consider as well, right? I mean, the age of the home, the materials, those are all things that are going to come into play very fast when a storm is passing through, and depending on how your house was built. So house A versus house B, and how that can have a an impact on literally an impact on on your property, but also on things like insurance and other things that get factored in too, depending on the construction standard of the house.
Does that factor in? I suppose it would, the age of the home and the construction, like what rating it has for hurricane.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Does it make a dramatic difference, or is it?
It can. I mean, I wouldn't say dramatic in the sense that house A versus house B. Let's say an age difference of 30 years. I don't think you'll see anything that's going to be 30-40% dramatic or anything of that sort, but it definitely does make a difference, absolutely. And depending on what category hurricane standard it was constructed, up until, like I said, ours is a 3, and a lot of the newer homes of course are the 4s and that kind of thing. So of course the standards have changed, and in terms of how these homes are built and the materials and that kind of thing. So it definitely does have an impact, for sure. Is it super significant? No, but definitely it will have some impact. And of course, when these storms come through, of course too, that's going to determine how well your home can stand up to these things, as well.
So Rob, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way, most efficient way to get a hold of you?
Well, there's a couple of go ahead. I was just gonna say there's a couple of websites they can go to. Our websites. The first one is our company website. It's robmehtapartners.com, and it's ROBM as in Mike, EHTA partners plural.com, and you can contact us, of course, through the form there and reach out. You can also, if you want to start your own home search, you can do that as well. We have a website, and it's actually called nationwidehomesearch.com, because we've got an MLS feed on there from pretty much every market, not just Florida. But if you want to have a look around, a consumer can go there and start the process there for Florida, or of course for any place else that they might be looking as well. But we're of course we're happy to hear from anybody. You're also free to, of course, give me a call as well. I'll throw up my number here. It's 305 771-0155. That's my office line. And of course, you can contact me through there as well. So yeah, we'd love to hear from, of course, we'd love to hear from Minnesotans that want to make something happen in the Florida market, because they are, the vast majority of the folks that we work with. So it's always
and this applies to like referral partners too. Like if it's like consumers
absolutely.
or realtors who want to develop a network with you down there too. Like they are encouraged to call you or contact you.
Absolutely. Yes. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, that is the lion's share of the business that we do comes to us from our referral partners. And so, that's a big part of what I spend a lot of my time doing, is just keeping our referral partners in the loop in terms of what's happening in the market. And of course, if there's an opportunity where we can maybe, take one of our properties and co-market through their database and do some of that to, help them sort of gain some exposure, then of course we're willing to do that as well. And so, yeah, absolutely. That applies to, of course, anybody that's tuning in that is thinking about doing something, for themselves. And of course, for any agent or broker that happens to be viewing this as well. Of course, we'd love to chat and figure out a way to work together and see if we can, add a new stream of revenue to their business and of course, build that partnership together.
Last question, I promise. Can
No worries.
Can an American citizen buy property in Thailand?
Well, that's a little bit of a tricky question, and I wouldn't say it's tricky. The short answer is yes. However, you are limited as a foreigner in terms of what kind of property you can buy.
Okay.
So, for example, the easiest thing to buy in Thailand as a foreigner would be a condominium. It's just due to the law structures and so on and so forth. When you talk about owning land, technically foreigners are not allowed to own land in Thailand. Now, there's ways sort of around it, if you will. You can do long-term land leases and things of that nature. You can own the structure of what's on the land, meaning you could actually own your house, but the land underneath would have to be in a lease or some type of entity, if you will, because there isn't what they call foreigner freehold is the term that they happen to use here, whereas we would call it fee simple ownership. That doesn't exist from that type of property. But other than that, yes, absolutely. Thailand actually has a very large, they call them expats here, expatriates, foreigner market here, in terms of folks that are either retired or they're working or, something in between. There's a lot of digital nomads that love being in Southeast Asia and Thailand just because of infrastructure and things like that, which are, very good in terms of, being able to work virtually. And when I'm here, I'm working virtually as well, dealing with, of course, our clients and that sort of thing, back home. So yeah, it's definitely doable. And depending on, of course, as we talked about Florida, they're same here. There's a wide, marketplace here. Everything from, I know a gentleman right now that's building a home a little ways outside of the city, as you can imagine, but for about 100,000 US, including the price of his land. And nothing spectacular. It's probably going to be about a 1,500 square foot home, but perfect for what he wants. It'll be brand new. He's going to own the land in a lease, if you will. And, so it's a really good, setup for what he wanted. And then of course you have the opposite end of the spectrum as well. You've got condos in Bangkok that, sell for, multiples, 5 and 6 and 8 and $10 million too. So, there's a wide variety of products.
How many Thai baht is that?
You're talking, upwards of 100 million Thai baht.
Was it 40 baht per dollar now?
It used to be, but now these days it's about 30 to the dollar. So the dollar has weakened a little bit. Yeah, the Thai baht has gotten stronger, and that's one of the things that we talk with the investors here about is that they're getting a discount by buying in the States right now because of the baht being as strong as it is. So it's a little bit weaker for us. It's lost about about a quarter of it's about a quarter of the value compared to what it was about 8-9 years ago against the dollar and it against the British pound and many other currencies. But if you are a Thai national, taking your money here and buying elsewhere, you're getting a nice discount, with that. So, but even with the if for a foreigner looking to invest here, I mean, even with the currency changes and such, again, you can still find some really good value plays and some affordable properties, even in the city. And just like anywhere else, that might mean that you might have to look at an older condominium building or something of that sorts. But there's a lot of that happening right now, where you have investors purchasing units in older buildings and then rehabbing the units, and getting a bigger unit, if you will, in a prime location, and then once it's rehabbed, it's literally like a brand new unit again. So there's a fair amount of that kind of stuff taking place, as well. So as an aside, even though I don't work the market here too, we do have a very good broker network team here that we've started to establish. So if anybody listening to this has any interest in Thailand, they can surely contact me as well, and I'll connect them with one of our brokers here.
Yeah, I know. For my family, like it was one of the best trips we've ever had was the time we spent a few weeks in Thailand. We went up to Chiang Mai, went down to Koh Samui, Bangkok a couple times, and we went throughout Vietnam and Cambodia, and traveled that whole area. It was so
fabulous
awesome.
Trip. Yeah.
Oh, so awesome.
Yet to run into anybody that has made a trip here and has said, I'd never go back, right? It's always like, I can't wait till I can get back. And so that's usually more of the response. So it is a really nice place to spend some time. The people here are amazingly friendly and amazingly helpful, and just the overall sort of climate, of that is really what makes it such an attractive destination. As you said, there's other places in this region as well that are well worth traveling to. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. You have Malaysia to the south, Singapore. There's quite a bit in this region to see and to do, depending on, how much time one has. But if you and I'm biased, of course, but if somebody said to me, I have 2 weeks and I want to go to Southeast Asia, I would say go to Thailand, definitely, because you're going to get a little bit of the best of, everything, if you will, but in one country instead of having to travel around, so. Have
you ever purchased one of those toads where they put the stick on top and it has like the serrated top and they rub the stick and it sounds like a frog chirping or whatever frogs do?
I thought you were gonna ask me if I've ever purchased one of those to eat.
Oh, well.
I have not. I'm adventurous, but I'm not that adventurous. But no, what's interesting, you mentioned that, and I know what you're talking about, but I haven't seen one of those in a long time. I'm not even sure where I would, I can probably think of a few markets where you can buy that kind of stuff, but I can't think of having seen one lately. So
I drove my stepmother-in-law nuts with one of those 2 Christmases ago. I just kept doing it. And anyway, so well,
and I'm sure she hid it from you after that.
She did. She actually did. In fact, I bought her one for her birthday. Just so that she would never forget the memory. So
that's right. Nice,
Rob.
Nice.
Thank you so much. You've been more than gracious with your time today. I know it's quite late there now. When are you coming back? Any idea?
Well, my original plan was to be stateside again around this time. But of course, with everything going on, just hunkering down as everybody else is trying to do as well right now, and just kind of ride this out a little bit. So I'll probably be here at least a couple of more months, of course, determining on, where this all goes and how fast, we see this subsiding. But the nice thing is I've got some flexibility between, of course, being here and being back in Florida and whether I'm here or I'm there, I've got my office set up in both places, so it's easy to work and stay on top of things,
Is your family with you? Is your family traveling with you? Or?
Yes, they are. Oh, yes.
That's great.
So that helps too. Yeah, exactly. That makes a big difference, of course, as well. So, we've established a presence here, of course, as an entity. So the nice thing with being a business entity here is that gives you a much more liberal visa, to spend time here. And so I'm not on the clock, if you will, in terms of having to leave at a certain point, which is of course terrific for something like this to have happened, that it happened, and then I'm on the proper visa, of course, in order to be able to stay, because there are quite a few folks that come here and they extend their tourist visas and things like that, but you're on a real finite amount of time, and if you miss those extensions, then you pretty much have to leave. So so it's a little more challenging if you're here on that type of visa versus having a business visa, which is more of a long stay type type situation. So, but I hope this passes. I do want to get back and of course do a little boating and be back home and that kind of thing. But we'll see now where this takes us to, and hoping for everyone's sake involved that we are over the hump here. Of course, sooner than later. And
right.
Well, we'll start to see this subside.
There's one guarantee that things are going to be different. Normal 3 months from now we will not recognize that, what that is, and hopefully as many people as possible can stay healthy and avoid the worst of what this is coming. I don't even know if anybody knows what that is yet. So anyway, well, Rob, I really do appreciate it. It's great catching up. I know this was like incredibly valuable. Yeah. Great seeing you. We'll have to do it again soon.
Anytime.
2 months from now, if you're still there, we are doing it again. Cause I just want to just be mad at you about the fact that you're in Thailand and I'm stuck in Minnesota. However, it'll be June then, so we'll have boating season and hopefully things.
Well, that's true. That's true. Or if I am still stuck here, maybe you can get away for a week and a half or so, and we can do one of these live from Bangkok. How about that?
Oh, that would be awesome. Oh man, trust me, I've been thinking about it. But I'd have to bring my kids, and I don't know if I'm willing to take that flight with 6-year-olds yet. But they're close. They're very close. So anyway,
when people ask me about the flight, I do tell them it's that's probably the hardest thing. It's a little bit of a hike from the States, for sure. But once you're here, and you get settled in, it's everything's everything sort of melts away at that point. But
agreed.
The flight's the flight. Yeah, there's just no way around that.
No, there isn't.
When you have kids.
Yeah, that's the thing. Whatever. Well, we will definitely do it again soon.
Topic.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, Rob. Take care of yourself, and I'll definitely be in touch. All right.
Thanks, Scott. You too.
Right.
Take care.
See ya.
See ya.